Hambini fans, and welcome to another episode of Hambini Reams. In today's episode, has bicycle innovation peaked the new look bike? By Hambini, aged 5. First of all, let's do a disclaimer. There's some pictures and stuff in here that I'm not quite sure where they came from. If you own the picture or whatever, then please use the comment box below and I'll give credit and all that kind of stuff. I am using them under fair use guidelines, so there we go. Right, this is the Look bike. This is a picture of it, and I think it was like leaked on purpose, which isn't really a leak, it's called marketing. And it was, I think it was released in the early part of January, and it went all the way around the usual shill sites as a leak. And this is it. So this is one of the Cofidis riders. And the thing that struck me about this bike was there's not really that much to talk about. It looks just like every other bike. Here's another shot of it at the Saudi tour. This is a much bigger bike than the previous shot. Some key things that you can see, because the pen is now working, but it was delayed, especially for the first 15 seconds to the YouTube police. Or are they absolute black police? We don't know. So this black bike with my all black shirt, I mean, when you look at it, it's got some features on there, like the clamp bolt. So the the seat tube clamp bolt looks like it goes in there that way. Drop seat stays. Now there is, I don't know, it's some comments about whether they are more aerodynamic or less aerodynamic. I think the jury's out, and it'll be very much individual dependent, because I mean, if you were to just draw the line there, I don't think it would make much difference. It's difficult for that to be modelled because you never get the same bike with the two seat stay formats at the same time in the same place with the same rider. So there you go. It's in turbulent air, whatever, because the rider's legs will have totally shredded that. Another key thing I noticed was I think that is a round steerer tube, which is a good thing. The head tube looks to be elongated, so if you were to look at that from above, I think it looks something like this, which is your kind of like aerofoil section. Now on this bike, which is just basically a massive bike designed for a giant, the back end of that looks like it's flat. That isn't done for aerodynamic reasons, that's more to do with how you make it, because if you have a point, let's say like that, you know, if you've got a pointy object, you can't get a very good compression in there when you're doing the carbon fibre layup. So they tend to flatten it off. The down tube looks to be fairly squarish. So again, this is the down tube. I think it looks something like that. Now, camtail aerodynamics, they've really sort of gone out of fashion of late. I don't think they were ever in fashion, but again, that's for structural reasons. So that kind of shape has a very good second moment of area, and also even a polar moment of inertia, because if you look at it, it's not far off a circle. Front tyre gap, this looks like it's been reduced, so I'll have some shots of it further on in the presentation. So that gap there, that is fairly critical. Now, I did get into a spot of bother. In fact, it wasn't really spot of bother, but if you have a look at the Colnago video, the Colnago head of aerodynamics, he called me to discuss that and about how to measure it, so how to measure the drag in there. So I explained to him, and he's taken that away, and he's going to go with that. I also think this bike's got a T47 bottom bracket. I actually think it's more from this shot here. So I think that bit there looks threaded. So that's what it is. If anyone knows what this crank is on here, is it a Look Z? I don't think it's a Look Z, but I mean, it could be. It could be. I'm almost thinking that's SRM, but if someone knows in the comments, do comment below. Right, this is another shot of it. This handlebar and the way the spacers go together, I've seen on lots of bikes that come out of China. So the Winspace one, like carbon, ICAN, they all seem to have a very similar setup in terms of that. There's not really much to talk about in terms of you know, innovation on the handlebars. It's clearly it's a sort of slender profile, but that's about it. Nothing like out of the ordinary, like the Cervelo bars or even the Colnago bars. This just looks fairly straightforward, and none of those vents either. And this shot shows you what that sort of head tube looks like on a much smaller bike. I mean, that is a much smaller bike than the previous shot. One thing I will draw your attention to is this. These are the brake calipers and the rotors that go in them. Now, I think that one is a Shimano Ice-Tech rotor. One of these. The front one, I'm not quite sure what that one is, but me and my mates were debating whether that is in the right way or not. Now, I think that's actually wrong. So some of the people, you know, who design brake discs, Brembo, AP, all that lot, think it's wrong. The reason is those slots inside those brakes look to be pointing in the wrong direction. So the rotation of the wheel is this second shot here, and the vanes should be trailing, but they're not. They're actually facing forward, and there's various guides on the internet, and I think they're facing the wrong way. Some people thought they were like to do with the slots to reduce the brake pad gases, but I don't think they are. If someone knows, then please do comment. Here's another description from it's the Lotus website. So here's another shot of that bike, and so the vanes look like they're going that way to me. Onset of airflow that way, so I think that's going the wrong way because the wheel rotation's that way. Now, comment, all appreciated. So this is a shot of some of the bikes you can get, and the Look bike to me looks very generic compared to some of the others. I mean, if you look at, let's say, the Winspace, that's my bike, you couldn't say there's really that big a difference between the two. If you took the disc brakes away, obviously you can get this in disc brake, and I think the later model probably has the integrated brake lines, but that's really about it. Now, some other options you've got the Canyon Aero and the BMC, and again, you know, it's the same sort of mix. So drop seat stays. This one has much more sort of scalloping of the seat tube, whereas the BMC doesn't. It's not quite as prominent. This one does, the Look does, and it's clearly been designed for massive tyre clearance because that's the in thing. Now, I've put this slide on because you can see how things have progressed. So this was, well, I'll talk about this one. This was the older bike. This was a 695. It moved on to the 795, and what an ugly thing it is. So this had the proprietary Look crankset, and the interesting thing in here is the brakes were in there, and there's a better shot of the similar design on the 695. The brakes just showed nothing to the wind. I mean, the majority, you know, CFD beyond here is extremely erratic. You will not get very good results beyond basically where the steerer hits the stem. This is, I mean, this is just a bit of a joke really. That bike, the 695, was a very well made bike, and I would get one. It was very good. I think that's the Aero light model, but again, beautiful bike, well made. Has some cutting features. So the integration of the brakes, the back brake was under here, so it didn't have, you know, a reduced drag. The Look Z crankset, and then also in terms of compliance, which is like an in thing these days, it had in there some like little rubber elastomers, and they used to absorb the vibration quite well, but it used to isolate that vibration from the rest of the bike, so your power loss from the flex, let's say, was isolated in the seat. This bike, the 795, which came out after it, I didn't like it. It just looked like a bit of a dog. You also had this massive gap between the tyre and the down tube, which on this bike, which is the 795 Blade RS, they minimised that. And also obviously went to disc brakes. I think this was available with rim brakes as well. So please correct me if I'm wrong. This bike was a bit of a dog because the number of people that had problems with it, it was just manufactured badly. But it shows the way that Look went, because this looks like a much more normal bike. So the 695, like over here, high levels of integration. It was basically unsellable in the second-hand market once you chopped the seat tube. This thing, that wasn't a problem. You could just chop the seat tube. You didn't even have to chop the seat tube because you could just move it up and down. Also ran fairly standard handlebars. This one had a Look, I think it was called a HS, was it Aero stem? I can't remember, which allowed you to move it up and down, which was a really clever design. This isn't it. Right, overall, what do I think? Well, there's an industry trend towards stiffness and frame. Aero is kind of like taken a bit of a back seat. And that's because it's one of these factors that's very difficult to measure, and if you put a different person on the bike, you can totally screw up the aero or make it really, really good, depending on how big they are. So you've ended up with lots of similar looking bikes. That T47 bottom bracket, I had a guess, I'd say it was 100 grams plus of additional frame weight. Now, Look bikes aren't normally known for being lightweight, so that's what I think was going to happen. I've already talked about the structural stiffness over the aero. Development of handlebars. Now, if you look at that, the handlebars have gone from an absolute extreme to still having the same level of customization. If you are going to buy a set of aerodynamic handlebars, I would always suggest getting ones that you can adjust. If you've got them in a fixed position, the amount of gain that you'll get from it being aerodynamic versus it putting you in the wrong position, it could just completely offset it. Camtail aerodynamics I've already talked about. Now, the build quality is likely to be good. So the 795 Blade RS was an absolute pig, but the 695 before it, I think that was a very well made bike. At a guess, I'd think this is going to come in at $5,000. Put your comments in below, and there we go. Right, that is it. If you did enjoy that presentation, remember to smash that like button. If you didn't, go screw yourself. And as always, keep banging your hairdresser.